Dr. Alexander, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Well, Matthew, it's my pleasure to be here and join you and your group. I'm very excited about our collaboration.
Me too. I'm really looking forward to doing more things with you in the future. And I think that this is a fantastic start. You know, we're deep into our peace, purpose, and prosperity retreat. I've been working with everyone to get their minds to go quiet so they can experience peace, which awakens purpose and then leads to prosperity. And I'm wondering if you could take a few moments right now and just bring us up to date on your near-death experience so that we can understand the context of our conversation.
Okay, well, it's important to point out that I was trained, as a conventional neurosurgeon, spent 15 years teaching at Harvard Medical School, thought I understood something about brain, mind, and consciousness. And that's where my near-death experience in November 2008 that consisted of a 1 week, a 7-day coma due to an extremely aggressive gram-negative bacterial meningoencephalitis completely changed my life forever. And the reason is basically my whole kind of memories of experience, et cetera, were deleted. And I faced this NDE with an empty slate. I had no memories of Eben Alexander's life or of humanity, of Earth, of this universe. And it was important to have that empty slate. But the other thing is that there were a lot of medical details there that should have prevented anything, any kind of dream or hallucination. This is all confirmed in a case report about my medical records written by 3 doctors not involved in my care, but fascinated by my miraculous recovery. That appeared in the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases, September 2018. But they made 2 very crucial points. One is they affirmed my statements in Proof of Heaven that my brain could not have had a dream or hallucination, much less this most profound, extraordinary, memorable, detailed, and transformational set of events in my life. And also, where did this recovery come from? I'm a 69-year-old guy who was 15 years out from a weekend coma from severe bacterial meningoencephalitis, and it does not appear to have slowed me down one bit. And I think there's a gigantic message there, and it has to do with the fact, for example, when that case report was submitted, the scientific peer reviewers at the Journal of Nervous and Mental Diseases said, wait a minute, this case is absurd. It's unprecedented in the medical literature. How in the world do you explain this complete recovery from such a devastating illness, given the parameters of his meningitis? And the 3 doctors who wrote the case report said it's because he had a near-death experience. That's what allowed for this profound, inexplicable amount of healing. They knew of other cases like Anita Morjani, who had healed her lymphoma, Dr. Mary C. Neal, who had a profound near-death experience in the setting of a kayaking accident and an over 30-minute warm water drowning back in the late 1990s. And these recoveries are very complete, and they're astonishing, and they're unprecedented in the medical literature. And it's really important, there's a long history of paying attention to miraculous healing that's documented in a medical sense and trying to make sense of it. And that's exactly what's happened here. And the biggest and most beautiful lesson to me as a neuroscientist, as a neurosurgeon, is the realization that what my journey showed me is the brain is not ultimately the creator or producer of consciousness. The brain's involved, of course. It serves more as a filter, a reducing valve, or a transceiver for primordial consciousness. And that is what is so important. And that is the revolution that my case and many similar cases, plus hundreds of scientists around the world working on these deep and profound mysteries about human experience, are coming to realize. And that is the primacy of mind. And in fact, that we share that mind, that we're all in this together. One of the deepest lessons of near-death experiences from the life review, your life flashing before your eyes, which goes back thousands of years across all belief systems, is that we are really, truly in this together. And the biggest lesson of those life reviews is the golden rule, to treat others as you would like to be treated. And I would say everything that I've learned in the 15 years since my experience and that includes a lot of work with scientists around the world to explain how all this can be, has been very kind of life-affirming. It shows that if we focus on the higher good, taking care of others, acknowledging the binding force of love that the universe has for us, that we can thrive in this world. But it has to do with acknowledging that our will has tremendous power, and we need to be wise in the ways that we use it. And that's where I think so much of where I've gone in the last few years, and again, with a very strong scientific support from colleagues, is helping to elucidate a much kinder, gentler, more peaceful and prosperous world for all involved, as we come to admit this unity, this mind that we share, and that it's all about love, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, mercy. These are the guides to our best human behavior that enables us to advance most fully as souls in the process of transformation.
Let me ask you a question, just a personal question about this. Have you made peace with death?
Well, I can tell you that I realize that death is an adventure. It's not an oblivion at all. It's the basically liberating our conscious awareness from the shackles, the prison of the brain, the body, and of this illusion of just being physical beings in a physical world constrained within space and time. Because we realize, especially with quantum physics, with the modern neuroscience and the hard problem of consciousness, with the binding problem, the apparent unity of consciousness within an individual, and also all the evidence for non-local consciousness that comes out of the world of parapsychology, things like telepathy, remote viewing, psychokinesis. These are all examples of the scientific model that's emerging, where consciousness and top-down causality of kind of that God mind that we all share is responsible for all of our emergent reality. This is very, very different from the conventional model, where our little ego mind is struggling with fear and anxiety, trying to kind of frighten us into a proper direction for survival. We've moved far beyond that with the advent of this notion of objective idealism. And I would say, if you're paying real attention to what I'm saying, you realize it's not just primacy of mind, but ultimately we would define it as primacy of spirit. And therefore, not just objective idealism, but I would say the philosophical position is what would be known as evolutionary panentheism, which is basically the notion that that God mind is within all of us and all that exists, and that it evolves, that there is free will involved. Because in fact, the materialist science that I worshiped before my coma, and I do not use that term lightly, that materialist science would scoff at you for claiming to have any free will whatsoever. They think it's all just chemical reactions, electron fluxes in the brain, giving an illusion of consciousness, an illusion of free will, and they have it completely backwards, because the thing that actually exists is mind. And that's where we as individual sentient beings, Homo sapiens, sapiens means wise. Well, I look around and I can see some evidence of wisdom, in medical science and communications and transportation, et cetera. But I also see where Homo sapiens falls way short of this claim of wisdom. And that's where I would point out things like our addiction to fossil fuels, how climate change that is all directly human caused is threatening 1 million species with extinction. And that is not such a wise course of action. It is time for us to take proper stewardship of this planet. And that really involves focusing on the higher good and acknowledging that the actions we take now will have a tremendous influence on how livable this planet will be in the next few decades. That's why it's incumbent on us to wake up and become much more cognizant of our kind of actions in this world and how they have tremendous influence. And we would want that influence to be for the higher good. And that involves a tremendous shift in our thinking and in our kind of direction and how we go forward. And I'm very optimistic about all of this, because I think this awakening is imminent. And it is really the only hope for survival of humanity, and really for many other species on this planet, is to come into a much richer kind of wise assessment of our relationship with the universe at large and what we can do to improve every bit of that world.
You had an experience whereby it became clear to you that there is no end, that the end is just a beginning, and that maybe, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that maybe this time that we're here on the planet in these bodies is not as important as we make it out to be, and that it might give us pause and allow us to lighten up a little bit. And can you just tell me about what the impact has been on you, having this realization that after death there's this next chapter, this next phase, however you would describe it? What has the impact been for you?
Well, I must say at the outset, it's very, very important to clarify one fact that a lot of people are not so aware of. And that is the scientific evidence that we come back again and again as souls. That is the scientific evidence for reincarnation. And the reason this is so important is because people can understand this much better if they know that that is part of reality. For example, at the University of Virginia, Division of Perceptual Studies, and you can get to this literature at uvadops.org. But if you go and start researching what these scientists have been doing over the last 6 decades, you'll realize it's a tremendous body of evidence supporting this primacy of mind. But right at the core of it is work they've done since the late 1960s in more than 2,700 cases of past life memories in children that suggest reincarnation. And in fact, 1,700 of those cases are what they call solved. That is, they actually identified the person who lived before described by the child. And, some people would say, well, I don't have past life memories. Well, the reason is, as Dr. Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker will tell you, they're the people who had this research up at UVA, is you must harvest those memories before age 6 or 7. Those memories are very common in us, in young children, and yet they're covered over by natural processes as we reach that age of reason at age 7 or so, which is where basically linguistic processes start to take over our memory recall functions in many ways. So as we come into teen years and adult years, most of us don't remember past lives and between lives, and yet those memories are there in many of these children who make these claims. And the scientific study of them has verified that this is a real effect. It's not imagination, this is not fabrication, but we've been here before. And the interesting thing, when you look at this bigger picture, especially in the context of near-death experiences and of the similar visions that people have in hospice, in terminal care facilities, et cetera, which is, life reviews and encountering souls of departed loved ones, and every bit of it is all the same. And so it shows us this is a general background of the human condition. Our loved ones are still there after they've left the physical body. We can have communication with them, and the whole field of after-death communications reveals some profound information supporting all that reality. And to me, this is very comforting to realize that I've been here before, I'll be here again, that we often kind of reshuffle our incarnations with our soulmates and groups and loved ones. But it's all in a process of soul school, of learning and growing and teaching that we do together. And that's where I would say, in commenting on your previous statement, that a lot of that action actually happens in this material world. When we're dumbed down, when that program forgetting has occurred, we buy into this incarnation and live it as best we can, but hopefully not completely dominated by the ego, which can prevent a lot of actual soul and spiritual growth. But it's very refreshing to realize that the scientific evidence strongly supports this notion of soul lines and our souls coming again and again. And that when you look at the world of transpersonal psychology, that evolved from the work of Carl Jung, Stan Grof, Michael Newton, Brian Weiss, Robert Schwartz, and others, that transpersonal psychology is a way of seeing this life and the events of this life in the context of a greater being. That we've had lives before, we'll have lives in the future. And it all makes much more sense when you take that big scale and start looking at things. And also you start to find that it's not just random. When we kind of look at ourselves as born into this and then pretend that the brain creates consciousness and that the challenges in life, et cetera, are all just kind of these random assaults on us, we realize from the world of transpersonal psychology that's not necessarily so. And that in many ways, the events of this life are a kind of a continuation of the learning and teaching of lessons from last lives and past lives. And that's where that life review is so important. The life review occurs in 25 to 50% of near-death experiences. Life reviews go back thousands of years across all cultures and continents and belief systems. And the most essential pieces to understand about a life review, as reported by Bruce Grayson in a paper in autumn of 2021 in the Journal of Near-Death Studies, is that 84% of people describe them as more real than regular life events. Something like 45% or so, I believe, describe it as reliving the events. It's not just remembering them. And about 70% or so, I don't recall the exact number, but a percentage pretty high up there, around 70, also feel like it's living the events from the perspective of those around you. That's very important. That shows how we're sharing the dream of the one mind in this process of growth and of learning. But the fact that 70% or so of life reviews are where you experience it from perspective of those around you, show us why, if you've been busy handing out pain and suffering to others, your life review is not going to be very pleasant because you have to receive all that. So in many ways, the life review is a great balancing act, and it tends to nudge us towards the golden rule: treat others as you would like to be treated. And that is something built into the very fabric of the universe through these common reports of life reviews that have similarities across all cultures going back thousands of years. So I think it's very important to understand that these are instructive about the larger aspect of who we are, how we're interrelated with each other through this binding force of love, and how we have this shared purpose and meaning in our life of basically growing and transforming and evolving all of consciousness. I realized within a year or two of my near-death experience on reading Pierre Teilhard de Chardin's marvelous mid-20th century book, The Phenomenon of Man, where he realized, as a paleontologist, so a scientist interested in billion-year timescales, but also as a French Jesuit priest, very spiritual in nature, he realized evolution was happening, just as people discussed about Darwinian evolution in the mid-20th century. But he also acknowledged that it was much bigger than just biological systems on Earth kind of evolving into higher forms, and that all of consciousness throughout the cosmos was in the process of evolution. And that's what I say this is all truly about, is sentient beings coming to realize their contribution to the evolution of all of consciousness throughout the universe.
Let's leave our audience with some actionable ideas that they might be able to take home that encapsulate this experience that you've had, where there's the realization, oh wow, this isn't it. It might not be as serious as I'm taking it. I want to learn and grow and become. Obviously, they're here at the event with us. But now what? Like, how do I put this into, like, these are very practical, action-oriented people. How do I put it into some practical, action-oriented ideas that they can implement into their life?
Well, I think it's important to acknowledge, first of all, that one of the greatest benefits of these lessons from life reviews, and the golden rule, and near-death experiences, and all that they're trying to teach us about consciousness is that binding force of love. And what near-death experiences will tell you, in vast majorities, 95%, is that world that we get into in the spiritual realm is one of peace and love and compassion and kindness, acceptance of all of us in this together, taking care of each other. It's not like you find some battle between good and evil at the deepest of spiritual levels. What you find is pure love of that God force. Very comforting. It's our true spiritual home. And to me, one of the greatest gifts of my NDE has been that within about 2 years of my near-death experience that occurred back in November 2008, I read about 150 books of physics, cosmology, quantum physics, spirituality, religious traditions, ancient Eastern and Western religious texts, trying to make sense of it. And what I came to realize is that this deep lesson of the science of consciousness built around this oneness and love is something that we can all come into knowledge of. You don't have to die or almost die to get this. Going within is very important. Centering prayer, meditation. For me, sacred acoustic binaural beat brainwave entrainment is an extremely powerful way of going within. And when you find out that in this notion of evolutionary panentheism or even objective idealism, that the primacy of mind is open to exploration, that's where meditation and centering prayer can lead us out into the universe. And so I highly, strongly advise people, take a break from your little ego mind. Spend 20 minutes or so a day in meditation, reflection, always focusing on the higher good, because that's the important thing. The ego has kind of fooled us into believing we're very important, and the ego says you got to take care of yourself above all others. Well, in fact, as connected spiritual beings, the highest good for all involved is really the goal. And when you take yourself out of that hot seat of the ego with all of its demands and realize that by helping others and by serving as a conduit of love, that very same love that I bathed in the midst of my NDE, I can serve as a conduit for that love through meditation. And for me, sacred acoustics was a very powerful way to do it. But any way you have of going within and turning off the little ego mind with all of its nonsensical and irrational demands is a beautiful way of rising up to become the soul you truly came here to be. The essential ingredient is acknowledging the oneness we share with others, and that love and showing kindness and compassion for self and for others is right at the root of beginning a successful pathway of growth as a spiritual being in the modern scientific era, where science fully supports the primacy of consciousness and the unity of mind and the binding force of love, as is so well represented through near-death and shared-death experiences, as well as after-death communications, deathbed dreams and visions, etc. Every bit of it reminds us of the power we have in our loving relationships with others. And as souls, we can thrive and really rise to the challenges of our very existence, to our true shared purpose and meaning, by acknowledging this shared consciousness and that binding force of love in all of our thoughts and actions in everything we do in this world.
So good. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking this time with all of us. We're really, really committed to living in a state of peace, having that purpose shine through, and then creating a life of prosperity out of living in this state. And you're a real example and a real beacon of light for all of us to focus on. Thank you so much for taking this time with us.
Well, Matthew, thanks so much for having me on. And I love what you and Kristen are doing, getting this out to the world. I mean, it is, this world, if you read the newspapers and the headlines and pick up your phone every time it beeps with a new news flash, it can be kind of disconcerting. And yet I think the kind of message that you and I share, what we're trying to bring to the world, is one that is very comforting and empowering, refreshing, and invigorating. So thank you for sharing this with the world at large.
Woohoo. Let's do this. Let's get out there and share the love. I love it.
Absolutely. Well, you got it right. I love it. And I loved reading reading your Forbes piece and that YouTube video. There's so many alignments with a lot of what we teach and try to put out to the world. And so it's great to always find other thought leaders who are out doing the same kind of thing.